Hi, welcome to episode 6 of a Bible Primer. My name is Doug. We're going to talk about the patriarchal era this time. This is really the basis of not the New Testament, but of the Old Testament Bible. We're coming in now to this patriarchal era. It's going to talk about, patriarchs are the fatherhead of a family. So we come into the time where Abraham he is the, if you will, the main character of this era, the main patriarch. He's the man. He's the man because God establishes a covenant with him. Abraham is an older man. He and his family move from about where Kuwait is nowadays, and they travel. I don't know how many miles that is up the Euphrates River bed corridor into southern, into Syria, and then down into the Holy Land there. So they travel a long ways because God said so. He's an older man who trusts God. He believes God, and it's credited to him as righteousness. So the Lord makes a covenant with him, and he says, Abraham, I'm going to turn you into a nation. I'm going to make you the father of many people. So, okay. He's 100 years old before Isaac is born. Now, Isaac is the son whom he's going to make that nation through. So the father of many nations becomes the father of one son at the age of 100 years old. More than that, God says, Abraham, this is the son that I told you, your promised son. I want you to take him up onto a mountain and sacrifice him to me. Abraham never questions it. He and Isaac and the servant the servant goes partly to the mountain, and he and Isaac go up the mountain, and he is preparing to sacrifice his son Isaac. But God doesn't let him go through with it. He stops him and says, I see you trust me. You believe me. You will obey me no matter what it looks like. He gives Abraham a goat to sacrifice instead, saves Isaac, I'm sure much to Isaac's relief, and becomes very favored with the Lord. So Abraham has a son Isaac. Isaac has a son Jacob, through whom this covenant is going to be fulfilled. And this covenant, I should have said, is a covenant of, number one, it's going to be of many people. Turns out to be a whole nation. And number two is a covenant for land. The earth is the Lord and the Lord's and the fullness thereof. He wants to give somebody a piece of land. He's got the right to give somebody a piece of land. And this land of Israel is the property that God gave Abraham and his descendants. So Abraham has Isaac. Isaac does not get sacrificed. He has Jacob. And Jacob's an interesting character. He runs away from his brother because he's kind of a sneaky, crafty boy himself. And his brother doesn't like it. So he runs away from his brother, goes back to his father's family, and marries, he actually marries two women and also has two concubines, if you will, the assistants, the nurses to the attendants to the two women that he marries. So he has, in essence, 4 wives, and with those 4 wives, he has 12 children. These 12 children will become the 12 tribes of Israel. And he returns back to the Holy Land, back to Canaan. And one of his children, a boy named Joseph, grows up, and he's favored by Jacob, whose name, by the way, at this point has been changed to Israel. And his brothers they're a little jealous. They don't like the fact that he's favored by his dad. So they sell him when they're all away from home. They sell him to a group of people who are going down to Egypt to do business, and they buy Joseph and sell him in Egypt as a slave. In Egypt as a slave, Joseph does very well. I mean, he's a slave, but everything, it's like the Midas touch. Everything he does well. It prospers. He's a handsome young man, and he belongs to a fellow named Potiphar, whose wife thinks that he's a handsome young man and makes some moves on him, which he rejects. But the wife's now, to save face, has said, "Oh, that slave tried to take advantage of me." So Potiphar sends him off to prison. So he's in prison for a few years. Doesn't sound like he's doing very well yet. But everything he does in prison prospers, does well. So the warden of the prison basically makes him the caretaker of the other prisoners in the prison. While he was in there, a couple of the prisoners have dreams that Joseph is able to interpret for them. They get released. One of them gets executed, but the other one becomes the cupbearer for the Pharaoh. And Pharaoh has a dream while they're out that he can't interpret. And the cupbearer says, "Oh yeah, there's this guy in prison who was able to interpret our dreams." So Pharaoh calls him up. Joseph interprets the dream for Pharaoh, and the dream says that there's going to be 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine. Take advantage of the 7 years of plenty and store up before the 7 years of famine hit, and you'll do okay. And Pharaoh says, "You know what? You're a pretty smart cookie." And he promotes Joseph, comes out of the jail, and becomes second in command of all of Egypt. He becomes very powerful. Joseph then implements the plan of storing up the excess food that comes in during the 7 years of plenty. And when the 7 years of famine hit, it hits in the whole world, which is all of Egypt and counts as being all of Canaan, all of the Holy Land. So Jacob, or Israel, and his boys are getting kind of hungry up there, so they go down to Egypt. Long story short, they find out Joseph is a hot shot in Egypt, and he brings them all down into Egypt, and it's a very pleasant time at this point for everyone. As Joseph takes care of his family during the famine, they had 5 more years of famine to go through, and he takes care of them during the famine, and all is well. This takes us through to the end of Genesis, and the family will spend about 400 years or 430 years in Egypt, and will come out in the theocracy era, and we'll talk about that next time. So I hope this is helpful. I thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.